Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Hey. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Yeah. Hey.
So, I went and got a different mic.
Okay.
This one just rests on your ear and doesn't have to go all the way around your head.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Want to try?
Sure.
I think it'll be better for you.
So we're sure.
So it just do your left ear, and it just will go around it like this.
We're good.
Tighten it up. Does that feel comfortable?
Yeah.
Does it feel too loose?
No. But my hair anyway.
Okay, so we'll just still do the same thing. I'm gonna turn it on and just say check.
Check 1 2.
That's gonna work way better. So we'll do that.
We're live.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm just saying, don't say anything bad.
Okay, cool. So this is what we'll do then. I think it'll be better. Okay, great. Okay, cool. It'll be easier for us to get on and off too. And we'll still use while around your waist. Okay, cool. I knew I had this, but I had to go find it in my office, and I was like, that would be a lot better for Amy. So anyway,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I'm sorry I'm the only one who requires.
No, it's fine. That's okay. These work really well. It gets a better sound than people.
You put that on me, I might want to talk longer.
We're going to get started in about 5 minutes, so if you can, go ahead and take your seats and use this opportunity to just double check your cell phones and pagers if you don't mind, and be sure that they're turned off. Thank you.
Today we gather with reflective hearts to remember someone dear whom we have lost. She led with grace, with honor and humility. We are left now with precious memories. The memories we have are of self-sacrifice. She took the oath and lived by its words. Dedicated to training the future of medicine, she forged a brighter path for others to follow. Though for a time we are left empty, her passion still fills us with greater ambition. A blessing to know her and by her to be known, and to carry the torch held high in her honor. She was our giant. On her shoulders we stand, looking forward, reaching higher as servants of all. In memory of Dean Susan Smyth, whom we lost too soon, she lives on in our hearts and will never be forgotten. Thank you, Dr. Smyth. We are so grateful for you.
Thank you so much, Amy, for that lovely poem and tribute. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Renee Bornemeyer, and on behalf of UAMS and the Morris and Smyth families and the College of Medicine, I would like to welcome you this afternoon and thank you for attending today as we remember and honor the life of Susan Smyth. A special welcome to Susan's family, members who have joined us today, her husband, Dr. Andrew Morris, her son, Edward Morris, her mother, Luann Smyth, and her brother, James Smyth, and their two therapy dogs, Carmine and Sela. It's good to have you with us this afternoon to remember her. As you join this afternoon, you may have noticed that on the screen, a few of the many tributes that poured in from team members of UAMS, as well as from other colleagues and medical communities around the country was shown. Though there were far too many to be able to show them all, please know that they've been collected and they will be shared with her family. In addition to everyone joining us in the auditorium today, we have many UAMS partners and team members, as well as Dr. Smyth's colleagues and loved ones elsewhere who are viewing this commemoration virtually. Our warmest welcomes to you as well. This afternoon, we will have a variety of speakers who will each share a perspective of the impact that Dr. Smyth had within the institutions she has worked, the mark she's made on her missions of service, and the influence and impression she has left on trainees, colleagues, friends, and family. I believe anyone who had the chance to work with her would consider themselves fortunate. In my role as Associate Dean of Faculty Affairs, I felt extremely blessed to have the opportunity to work closely with her. She was that rare and unique individual who could speak the multiple dialects of academic medicine. She understood well the clinical mission, the need for cutting-edge research, the importance of educating our next generation, and for developing our faculty. She acknowledged everyone's contribution and individual worth. Dr. Smyth was someone who led by example, and she did not shy away from a challenge. She sought to empower women in medicine. Her goal was to invest in our women leaders and their professional advancement. She did so by supporting the development of a women's leadership workshop, which will continue. She established an executive coaching program within the college, making that service available to faculty through trained peer support. She also made the initial push for the partnership with the University of Arkansas Sam Walton College of Business in the development of the Executive Healthcare Leadership Institute to offer up-and-coming faculty the opportunity to be trained in this arena. She was focused on increasing diversity in our workforce and supporting initiatives to help propel the growth and cultivate the advancement of our underrepresented faculty. Dr. Smyth's leadership style was inclusive. Everyone's opinion was valued. She wanted to hear your thoughts, and she was able to discern the meaning far beyond the words that were said. She sought to understand, and through that understanding, she empowered faculty by trusting them and their decisions. The UAMS faculty embraced her and her vision for institutional advancement. As you hear from others today, I am sure that you will see that these things ring true throughout her medical career, relationships, and life. I will now turn the podium over to our Chancellor, Dr. Cam Patterson.
Good afternoon. As difficult as this is, I'm grateful that we all have the opportunity to be together today. For those of you who are in this room, those of you who are participating online, share in the grief and the sadness and the difficulty of remembering Susan Smyth, but also sharing in our pride in knowing her, in our appreciation for how much she has done to each one of us personally and collectively, in gratitude for what she has brought to the world of cardiology and to academic medicine, to her trainees who will follow in her footsteps, her colleagues. Susan did not live long enough, but in the years that she was here, she did more than we could ever imagine. I'm sure you'll hear a few stories today. Mine's brief. I first met Susan when I was moving to the University of North Carolina, start what is now the McAllister Heart Institute. I was moving my lab, getting things off the ground, and suddenly there was this whisper in the air. Susan and Andrew are coming back. I heard this over and over again before I even met Susan face to face. People were so excited. Faculty members who had worked with her, people who had trained with her. It was just an overwhelming feeling. I remember the first time that I met with her, I was supposed to be interviewing her to decide whether she would have a position. And I already knew it was a done deal. It was so gratifying to see Susan, who, remember, she was not only a faculty member, she was also doing her cardiology clinical fellowship. To see her making those first purchases to get her lab started. I remember the day she got her KOA funded. I remember the day she got her first R01 funded. I remember how happy she was with her first postdoctoral fellow, those first publications before they start getting old. There was no doubt that she was destined to be a great cardiologist, a great scientist, and an incredible leader. But she filled in the gaps with so many other things. Her mentorship could not be topped in any way, shape, or form. She cared so much, not just for herself, but for those she taught, those she paved the way for. And she created a huge alley for people to follow in her footsteps, an alley that was not necessarily there before she showed up. We are in depths of gratitude for what Susan has done for UAMS, for the people we care for the state of Arkansas, for everyone who passes through here. Her work in diversity, equity, and inclusion is unparalleled. Her support of all faculty members, especially our female faculty members, will not be forgotten. Her focus on excellence, on accomplishments, could not be beaten. The work that she did on our curriculum in Northwest Arkansas, highly innovative curriculum that will impact the state for decades. She fostered our relationships with our partners, especially Baptist Health and Arkansas Children's Hospital. She made us all better, you know, and we need 20 more years of Susan, but we got almost 2. And what we got was really special. Just want to thank the Smyths for raising Susan to be the person that she is. You must be very proud. I want to thank all of those who have helped Susan become the person that we will always remember. Her friends from Chapel Hill and college, who she remained very close with throughout her life. Her first research mentor, Leslie Parisi, who you will hear from in a moment. Leslie guided Susan to be the first MD PhD graduate at the University of North Carolina and set her on her research trajectory. Barry Kohler, who is her research mentor in New York. Barry, I bet you are online. You accomplished a lot when you created RIAPRO, but I think your mentorship of Susan is just as important. Her colleagues at the University of Kentucky, who helped Susan climb the leadership ladder to prepare her to come to UAMS to be our dean. And especially thanks to Andrew, Edward, and William, not just for sharing your mom with us, but for helping to make her the incredible person that she always was and always will be in our minds. I will never forget Susan. There are things that I want to tell her right now. I want her to know that my daughter, Anna Elise, is going to be going to UNC next year. And I can't tell her that. And I'm sorry.
Like many of you, I'm still so shocked and saddened that Susan Smyth is no longer with us. My name is Leslie Parisi, and I'm Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at the University of Vermont. But when I first met Susan, I was a young, new assistant professor in the Department of Pharmacology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. My lab worked on platelets, which, as many of you know, cause heart attacks, strokes, and other thrombotic disorders. Susan was the second PhD student to join my lab in 1990 as part of UNC's MD PhD program. For her doctoral thesis, Susan focused on exploring the mechanisms of activation of the major platelet adhesion receptor, integrin alpha-2b beta-3. She worked in the lab around the clock, not because I was such a taskmaster, but because of her intense curiosity, inner drive, and love of science. She read constantly. I remember seeing piles of manuscripts and reprints on her desk, which in those days before the internet really took off, represented many hours at the library. She truly drove her research, but despite her intensity and drive, she was always such a delight, ready and willing to help anyone in the lab. And it was not surprising to those of us who knew her that she would complete her thesis work and defend her thesis only 2 years later in 1992 with multiple publications, top university honors for graduate and medical scholarships such as the Thomas C. Butler Award, the John B. Graham Research Society, and Sarah Graham Keenan Fellowship. Susan also started attending and presenting her work at meetings of the American Society of Hematology. And from her knowledge of the literature and then seeing and hearing Dr. Barry Kohler present his work at these meetings, she identified him as a role model clinician scientist and joined his lab first at Stony Brook and then at Mount Sinai, and the rest is history.
Good afternoon, Chancellor Patterson and all my friends and colleagues at UAMS and elsewhere who have all had the privilege of knowing Dr. Smyth. Thank you for inviting me to make some remarks. My name is Philip Kern, and I am a professor of medicine in the Division of Endocrinology at the University of Kentucky and Associate Vice President for Clinical and Translational Research. I have known Susan since I first visited the University of Kentucky in 2007. You know, when you visit an institution, you always circulate among other prominent faculty members, and there's been a growing shortage of physician scientists for many years, and so it was logical that I would meet Susan. And when I met Susan, I had an instant burst of happiness. I felt that Susan was a very talented person, and we discovered that we had a lot in common. Susan went to Mount Holyoke College, and I grew up in New England. My wife's from nearby Amherst, Massachusetts, and I related to her background as having attended one of the Seven Sister Schools. Susan trained in cardiology and coagulation in New York City at Mount Sinai, and I also did my clinical training in New York City. We clicked in other ways as well. Susan was a cardiologist, very interested in metabolism, and I am an endocrinologist interested in metabolism, especially how it affects heart disease. So when we first submitted our CTSA grant, Susan was a part of that submission. She was one of the leaders of this effort and was the PI of the TL1 pre- and postdoctoral training grant. Susan was clearly very adept at this, and since she was also the PI of a cardiology T32 training grant, and she was director of the MD-PhD program. Training was clearly intimate to her, and she continued to excel in these roles for as long as she was at UK. When I think about Susan, I think of her as the best of the best in terms of being a physician, a scientist, and a mentor. And I honestly don't know which one of these to mention first, physician, scientist, or mentor. Her passion for all three of these roles is really overwhelming. So let's begin with her mentoring. Her passion for assisting junior investigators, building on the next generation, was readily apparent in her many activities, both formal positions, such as her role with T32s and TL1s, but also her ad hoc mentoring. She was always there, and I suspect many of her previous mentees are here today, and hopefully we'll hear from some of them. Susan was an outstanding scientist. Rather than list all of her R01s and other grants and the many publications, I would just like to relay her fundamental insight into coagulation in particular and cardiology research in general. And, you know, we might be in a meeting, perhaps some boring but necessary administrative meeting, and you could see the light up in her eyes when suddenly the discussion would turn to science. She loved science. She loved to get into it. And it would be a refreshing break, you know, when you'd actually get into some science rather than just talk about all the stuff that we have to do to make the institution function. And finally, as a physician, Susan was a cardiologist and chief of cardiology for many years. If a patient needed her or if a member of her team needed her, she was there. She took this role very seriously. I remember many times I would call her, perhaps from clinic. Susan, I have a diabetic who's having a lot of chest pain and needs to be seen. Susan would take the information and she'd ensure that patient was seen that day. Sometimes she would see the patient herself. On the flip side of this, back to that boring but necessary administrative meeting, she would often walk into the meeting on her phone, mumbling instructions. She's talking to someone probably related to acute care. You could often tell that her mind was in the middle of someone's left ventricle. Yet she would eventually and astutely put the phone down, pivot, and be part of the meeting and help move forward whatever effort and clinical research that we were engaged in. Susan, you're a model physician, scientist, and mentor to all of us. You will be remembered. Thank you.
I'm Lee Archer. I'm chair of the Council of Department Chairs. As we discussed what to say at this memorial service, I asked Sarah Shalin, who had worked closely with Dean Smyth, to write out her remarks, and I'm going to read what she wrote. There are times when I'm grateful for vocabulary, for words, and for the wealth of nouns and adjectives to describe a positive experience. Working with Dr. Susan Smyth for the short time she was here was inspirational. As you have likely already heard today, Dr. Smyth was a physician scientist. As the director of the MD PhD program here at UAMS, I often describe our combined degree program as one that trains future physician scientists to build and walk the bridge between bench research and the bedside care of our patients. Dr. Smyth lived on that bridge, back and forth, and I'm certain that contributed to her effectiveness as a dean. She was fully invested and equally committed to all aspects of the academic mission, and I was able to see that with her involvement in our MD PhD program, she didn't just want to know about successful outcomes of this program. She was interested in learning about our pool of applicants, and she met with our current students on Zoom to discuss the importance of physician scientist careers. She wanted to expand our program and to give our students more opportunities to link medicine to science, to public health, and to epidemiology. She once told me that she felt great responsibility as a woman physician scientist to open doors for others coming behind her. She told me she chose cardiology as her specialty largely because there were so few women in the field and someone had to pioneer it. I like to think she felt a similar responsibility as a dean of the College of Medicine. She was a thoughtful, deliberate, and accessible leader who recognized and valued the contributions that each member of the team made to this institution. And she focused on getting to know individuals here at UAMS just as she focused on the big picture. There are moments where words are wholly insufficient to convey the gravity of an experience. And more often than not, those experiences involve loss. The right words to express condolences to the people closest to her, to her mother, her brother, her husband, her sons, those are elusive. Trying to explain to those who did not get the privilege of working with her regularly that the loss of her leadership is a loss for them, that too is difficult. I wish that we could have benefited from her leadership for a longer period of time. I hope that her attributes of kindness, humility, intelligence, and integrity continue to influence our own efforts to lead in her absence. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm thankful for the opportunity to provide testimony on the impact that Susan Smyth had on research at UAMS. I am Teresita Belido, chair of the Department of Physiology and Cell Biology. I had the privilege to become close to her during her tenure as Dean of the College of Medicine. I had been back at UMS for 1 year when she joined in July 2021, and since the very beginning, our meetings were honest, productive, and much more than transactional. She was personable, and although we were very different, we had few things in common. We both had raised boys, young men now, and she was, as I am, primary caregiver of her mother. With us today, Susan's mom, and my mom, who will turn 96 tomorrow. And something else I didn't know until now, we both are dog lovers. And professionally, we have in common our passion for basic and translational research in the frame of a College of Medicine. Susan Smyth, a translational researcher herself, was an effective leader, and she was committed to increase excellence in research at UAMS. I will only mention a couple of concrete initiatives that she sponsored in the short 1.5-year period that she was with us, and that made a mark in research. Susan created the Research Creative Hubs that support collaborative research in key signature areas of excellence, with the goal of increasing UAMS recognition at the national and international levels. Susan paid close attention to the input of basic science chairs to learn about the problems as well as the potential solutions, and then she acted effectively to get things done. She supported equality in faculty compensation to increase recruitment and assure retention of UAMS researchers, thus allowing UAMS to fairly compete with institutions from neighboring states. She also acknowledged the crucial role of administrative support and initiated plans to improve the infrastructure required to grow research at UAMS. Among these initiatives are streamlining procurement and travel, reorganizing the processes of pre- and post-award support and grant accounting, and facilitating the contracts and material transfer agreements, MTAs, to assure that UAMS researchers have similar access to technological advances compared to other U.S. institutions. Importantly, all these initiatives are aligned with the 2029 UAMS mission. One of her preferred quotes was, "The bad news is that time flies. The good news is that you are the pilot." Without doubt, Susan piloted efficiently several initiatives to make research stronger at UAMS, and it is now our responsibility to follow this path. Thank you.
My apologies for not being with you in person today. I would certainly like to have been there to recognize Dr. Smyth and her contributions. I started looking back through text messages and emails with her and others about her to remind me what I should talk about. I found this conversation between some of the clinical chairs and myself after her first introduction to the College of Medicine, on Zoom, of course, but she led a group discussion. And one of the chairs wrote, "That may have been the best meeting since I have been at UAMS. It was without a doubt the best College of Medicine meeting that I have been to." Dr. Smyth continued to work with the chairs, both clinical and non-clinical, to improve the College of Medicine and help us with our departments. She did not micromanage, just the opposite. She made it easy to work for her because she helped us when we needed help, but otherwise did not try to manage our day-to-day work life. There were times when we didn't always agree. For instance, one time she had said something in a meeting more or less very strongly disagreeing with something I had said. I went back to my office, got my data, and asked if I could meet with her. And when we did, and she reviewed the data, and she said, "Lowry, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I'd like to apologize publicly to that same group so that that's correct." And I said, "It is absolutely not necessary." But I saw then just the type of person she is. She was committed to the clinical care, although that was not her role as dean. With the new structure we have with the service lines and the College of Medicine being more related to research and education, she lost some of her influence in clinical care. But she kept it because she cared, and she was always striving to be more involved and make sure that the chairs had what they needed. I don't feel like I really got to know her until about 3 weeks before her death. I was called to her office for a meeting not one that I had requested, and one that I wish she had not requested. And but as we got to talking, I said, I don't even know why you're involved in this area, because it doesn't have anything to do with research or education. And she quickly responded, because I care, and because I remember what you told me when I first came here. When she came, she met with each of the chairs to find out their thoughts on how she could be a more effective dean. And for me, it was pretty simple. And she remembered that I had said the most important thing is that we take good care of our Kansans and that we improve their health. And I said, they don't really care about many of the awards that we brag about. They care about the fact that we deliver great care and they can actually access it. And she reminded me of that in this meeting. I was called there to talk about Tosh. And at the time, I said, have you seen Tosh? And she said, not really. And she said, I'd like to. Well, lo and behold, a few hours later, I was supposed to be doing a potential donor tour of Tosh, and they had to cancel at the last minute. So I reached out to Dean Smyth and said, would you like to go? She said yes. And then the storm started. We had tornado warnings. It's raining like crazy. And she still shows up. We're all wet. And that lady walked through that whole building, all 4 floors, no elevator, and up and down those stairs, and she wanted to see everything. And she was extremely complimentary, but she was obviously struggling. Even an orthopedic surgeon could tell that she was not well. And I said, we don't have to do the whole thing. We can do this, we can do that. And she goes, no, I am fine. It's just these shoes I'm wearing. And she told me multiple times the reason she was struggling was because of her shoes. But she had to see everything. And she was extremely complimentary and followed up afterwards to say that, that she was glad to see that we're doing that for Arkansans. She continued to play on the Arkansan theme with me. And I realized that she had so much to offer this institution and to the clinical care at this institution because, as she said, she did care. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Molly Gathright, the Executive Associate Dean for Graduate Medical Education. Dr. Morris and family, UAMS administration, faculty, staff, students, and trainees, friends and colleagues joining us remotely, I am humbled by the privilege and honor to be before you celebrating the life of Dr. Susan Smyth. It is a testament to the impact of her life that so many have gathered here today to celebrate a wife, a mother, a sister, a mentor, a colleague, and a friend. In her short time here at UAMS, I can clearly say that Dean Smyth earned the respect and affection of the UAMS family. It was her keen scientific mind that valued research and scholarship, her clinical acumen and desire to put patient care first, her belief and commitment to education, and ultimately, her love for people that made it unnatural for her to be the dean of our College of Medicine. From the moment that she entered UAMS campus, Dr. Smyth, despite being a new dean with lots of new responsibilities, took the time to get to know her team across campus, to discuss individual career aspirations, to engage in her research, and to take the time to share her clinical skills with patients and even engage in bedside teaching with our students, residents, and fellows. We have heard remarks today regarding the impact Dr. Smyth had in the areas of research and clinical care. We can see she was passionate about every aspect of the UAMS College of Medicine mission. And again, in too short of 18 months, she played a vital role in the life and the growth of the college. I can personally attest that this is so, specifically in regard to the educational mission. It is well known that Arkansas suffers from a statewide shortage of physicians. Dr. Smyth acknowledged this, and shortly after arriving to UAMS, she began engaging in the extensive graduate medical education efforts for residency expansion. It was exciting to work with her in these initiatives, and she was enthusiastic to work with collaborators across the state. identifying increased and/or new training opportunities to allow for residency training growth. She advocated for continued expansion of existing training opportunities, and she understood that the expansion of graduate medical education in Arkansas was the key to ensuring a well-trained, self-sufficient physician workforce in the decades to come. Dr. Smyth was a remarkable educator who mentored hundreds of trainees and guided them to excel in their career development. She was a role model, an advocate for trainees, whether that was a medical student or a resident or fellow or a postdoctoral fellow or a doctoral student. And notably, she was a champion for the advancement of women. A cardiology fellow who had the recent privilege of working with Dr. Smyth shared with me that seeing a woman balance motherhood and clinical administrative responsibilities in the medical field is encouraging for many young women. But seeing a woman make a clinical and educational impact in the cardiovascular field is awe-inspiring. This same fellow went on to describe Dr. Smyth as an incredible role model of what a woman in cardiology or medicine could be, and her life's work and educational impact is an impeccable legacy. Dr. Smyth understood the urgency of equity and that socioeconomic disadvantage, so common in our state, served as a barrier between student success or even recruitment. To this end, she was passionate about ensuring that the very best students came to Arkansas for their medical school training. Therefore, she made scholarships a philanthropic priority for the college. Greater than $11 million in philanthropic gifts designated for scholarships were made to the College of Medicine during her short time with us. This $11 million is a third of the total $32.5 million for all giving in the college. In making scholarships a priority, she created the new Dean's Full Tuition Scholarship, which was awarded for the first time this academic year to 5 outstanding students. These student recipients represent a diversity of demographics, backgrounds, and reasons they felt called to serve others through the art of medicine. After learning of Dr. Smyth's passing, many students have consistently shared that Dr. Smyth made them feel valued, seen, and heard. And I would say that this was through her elegant and quiet, yet active way of listening. When I think of Susan Smyth and her leadership here, there are 2 words that consistently come to mind: humble and gentle. Her gentleness came from the state of humility, and it was the application of this that allowed her to lead in the most kind and efficient ways. I have no doubt that it was her gentle and humble spirit, along with her unwavering commitment to education, that has helped shape the trajectory of countless lives she has touched, not only here at UAMS, but across the nation. She leaves behind a powerful legacy and a sphere of influence. In times like these, for many there is sadness and loneliness, which comes when a close friend or congenial spirit is no longer with us. But for all who come to this university, Susan Smyth left the example and inspiration of a rare and great personality who gave herself to others, who radiated goodness in its highest sense, and who personified education. She helped, and even now, in her absence and through her legacy, will continue to help others meet life with more strength and courage than ever before. Susan Smyth illuminated our souls. She whispered into our hearts, and she brought us together. We will remember her brilliance, her compassion, her humility, gentleness, commitment, and kindness. Her impact, not just on education, but on our college, our campus, our health system, and those who had the privilege of knowing her, is immeasurable. Andrew, Edward, William, Luann, James, Nathan, her family, thank you. Thank you for sharing your wife, your mother, your daughter, and your sister. Please join us now for 1 minute of silence as we remember Dr. Susan Smyth. This moment will be followed by a reading of Emily Dickinson's Forever is Composed of Nows by fourth-year medical student Paige Jones-Brooks.
Thank you, Dr. Gathright. I'm both humbled and honored to be a part of this celebration of Dr. Smyth. Forever is Composed of Nows by Emily Dickinson. Forever is composed of nows. 'Tis not a different time, except for infiniteness and latitude of home. From this experienced here, remove the dates to these. Let months dissolve into further months, and years exhale in years. Without debate or pause or celebrated days, no different our years would be from Anno Dominis. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to welcome Dr. Andrew Morris to the podium to share some remarks this afternoon. Dr. Morris.
Let me see. Well, thank you all so much. This really means a lot, and it's been a wonderful event, and I'm going to say a few things on behalf of our family. This is our older son, Edward. We have two sons. William is hopefully watching online. Ed will be going to medical school in the summer, so he's following in Susan's footsteps. And these are our dogs. Their names are Carmine is the male dog, and this is Seela. And they worked as therapy dogs at the University of Kentucky for about 6 years. Now, it was Susan's idea to get the dogs. We had a friend that had a dog, and she tracked down where it came from and decided that we should get one because she'd read that patients who've had heart procedures do better if they get out of bed and walk around, and she thought the dogs would help with that. And I was concerned that this dogs would just be a lot of work and I'd end up having to do everything. But Susan was like, no, we'll sort it out. And of course, because it was Susan, she'd organized a sort of platoon of people who would look after the dogs at work and take them around the hospital. She had people that would have them when they weren't working and nurses who would work with them. So pretty much all I had to do was actually get them to work. And if I didn't do that, I would start getting texts and phone calls about where were the dogs. And so they obviously made an impact on people. Now, they haven't done anything for about 2 years because we moved in the middle of the pandemic, but they're sort of ready to go back to work, and I'm hoping we can find something for them to do here, perhaps at UAMS, or actually my theory is I could find something to do at the Children's Hospital, perhaps. And of course, they operate on a treat-based system, so that's no different than running the hospital, really. And Susan always found time to take them for a walk in the mornings, and they're really a comfort to me now, and so I'm very lucky to have them. Now Susan loved working at UAMS. She was so excited when she got the job here, and she wanted to start as soon as she possibly could. And so we actually just bought a house here that we didn't actually set foot in until we'd actually committed to buy it. So it was a good job that sort of worked out. And she actually had a collection of antique furniture that she'd got from her grandparents, which was actually the furniture she had when I first met her, because it was what she had when she was in medical school, and she kept it. And it was in our basement, so she kind of got it out of retirement. We had it moved here. We drove a car down, then me and Edward came back, and we moved her in. And she went straight to work. I mean, literally, when we were moving the stuff in, she'd gone and was in her office. And I went back to deal with everything else so we could eventually move here to Little Rock. And we've loved living here together. It's a wonderful town and community, and we really felt at home here. You know, this event is really a sort of testament to a, you know, it's a cliche, but a life well lived. I mean, Susan, you know, as we've heard, was just such a smart person, you know, a fantastic scientist, researcher, you know, a physician, an administrator, a leader in academic medicine. The research in our lab was so important to us. I mean, we trained people in our lab who've gone on to successful careers in research, you know, all over the country. Some of them are here today, and we're very grateful for that. Others I know are watching online. You know, in the past month, I've heard from friends and colleagues and collaborators from all over the world, you know, remembering Susan. And, you know, one thing that I've been quite touched by is that there have been some memorials that have appeared in scientific journals. Actually, Cam and Leslie Precy, Wally Whiteheart was one of our colleagues in Kentucky, and Barry Kohler wrote one in a journal that we like to publish in. So, you know, we're scientists, and, you know, when we try to publish things, we want to publish them in journals where we think other scientists are going to see them and going to review them. And so this was particularly important to me because it was published in one of the American Heart Association's top journals, which ironically actually rejected the last paper that me and Susan actually published together. Although we did publish it eventually in another journal. So I think we definitely got the last laugh there. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. But anyway, you know, when these things happen, you know, it really makes you think about what's important in life and what's the measure of a life and a good life. And so, you know, I'm a scientist, so I like to understand things. I think things like human behavior can be understood. And I'm also someone who struggles a bit with being a bit down from time to time. And you can imagine that, you know, I've been thinking about that a lot. And so I am interested in what are the determinants of human well-being. And so when you look at what people have done, you know, clinical studies, longitudinal studies, there are certain things that really stand out. And firstly, I'll tell you what it's not. It's not wealth or success or where you go to school or where you work or how many grants you've got or how many papers you've published, how much time you spend at work. None of that really has any impact on how happy or fulfilled we are. And so the secret to happiness and fulfillment is the relationships we have with other people. And nobody understood that better than Susan did. People in secure, trusting relationships with others are consistently much happier and healthier. And on the other hand, loneliness and insecurity have negative effects on our health. And when I asked Susan, when she started the job, and I asked her, well, what's the hardest thing? What's the most difficult thing about your job? And she said, well, it was having to get to know all of the department chairs and division chiefs and center directors and the team in the dean's office, and not just getting to know them, but having a relationship with them where she could build sort of trusting personal relationships with her team so they'd be comfortable asking for help when they needed it, and they would know that she supported them and wanted them to succeed. And I think she really knew how to do that, sort of almost instinctively. And that's important because, what we do, working in this arena in academic medicine, it does create insecurity. If what I do, research, funding your lab, publishing papers, there's a lot of risk there. Looking after patients, teaching and training people. You're pushing. If you're doing it properly, you're trying your best, and sometimes things aren't going to work out. And it's no different running the business of the healthcare enterprise, balancing the books, and there's huge responsibility there. And we spend so much of our time at work and thinking about work, and so having a trusting relationship with the place we work is important. And Susan knew that, and as public face of the institution, I think she really knew how to make people safe and secure and valued. And I know that the relationship she built here contributed to a sense of well-being that she had that sort of kept her going even when things were difficult and discouraging. So I know she was happy here. I know she was fulfilled. And I know that was a source of comfort to her at the end of her life. And so I thank you all for being part of that. So, Susan's, I guess her superpower was that she made everybody feel better about things. And if she did that for you, then you can only imagine how important she was to me and to our family. And, we miss her terribly. So thank you again. Thank you for remembering Susan and our family. Thank you. All right.
Thank you again for joining us this afternoon to celebrate Dr. Susan Smyth. She leaves behind a long legacy of growth and accomplishment across many academic campuses and national organizations. And she calls us to a higher level to commit to continuing that mission as we move forward. Her focus was and would still be looking ahead to the science that needs to be discovered, to the challenges that we face and the work that still needs to be done. She did not settle. She was resolute in her mission and purpose, as we also should be. We honor her by continuing mission-focused and relentlessly pursuing the work which impassioned her. For those of you who are here in person, you are welcome to join the reception just outside the auditorium immediately following the program. You might notice that there's an abundance of chocolate, and as many know, Susan was a great fan of chocolate. Once again, on behalf of UAMS, her family and the College of Medicine, thank you for being part of this celebration of our amazing dean, physician, scientist, colleague, and friend, Dr. Susan Smyth. Thank you.